Supposedly, the reason that Final Fantasy is called Final Fantasy is that it was Squaresoft's last chance release before going bankrupt, back in the days when games had 8 bits and no room on the cartridge for actual plots. The heroes of FF1 were generic D&D ripoffs wrapped around some kind of weird causality violation, which was almost a plot, and so the game was better than everything else on the market and became wildly popular. Realizing they were onto a good thing, Square went on to put out 24 more Final Fantasy games about generic D&D ripoffs, usually featuring more causality violations with the occasional break for aliens and zombies. By now, the original explanation for the name is wearing pretty thin, especially since Square merged with another RPG developer and emerged as the immortal god monster men know as Squeenix. The real reason it's called Final Fantasy is that they're going to keep putting out these damn games until the sun goes dark and all the works of mortals are drowned in the infinite cold of the final night. The first 2 sequels didn't make it to America because at the time it was unconstitutional for Japan to perform hostile acts in foreign territory. Final Fantasy II, no, that's 4, this is 2. Final Fantasy II had a great story about an empire and a rebellion and treason and friendship and courage, but no one ever finished this story, because after 5 hours of having to get the crap beaten out of him to increase his hit points, the player gouges his eyes out with the pointy corners of his badly designed NES controller. Final Fantasy III, on the other hand, was a marvel of smooth and interesting gameplay, a lot like FF1 with better menus and a job system. It was about 4 identical quadruplets with no names, I wish I was kidding, who have to find crystals or something, and an airship? Actually, the 2 of them together might have made one good game, but when they finally came over, Square just fixed the system for 2 and wrote a plot for 3, which happily means that none of you have any idea whether I'm making this shit up. Now we have FF4, the first game in the series to write a main cast larger than the maximum party size. Unfortunately, the first game in the series to let the player control character switching was FF6, which means they had to come up with ways to get rid of the old characters. Your party will be burned, drowned, turned to stone, and blown up in various interesting ways, but they somehow all turn out to have survived, even when you didn't want them to. Except for Tella. In other news, Cecil is an alien and Golbez is his brother. Final Fantasy V, the game you've never played. You claim to have played it because it gives you geek cred if people think you played a Japan-only game, but you're lying. They were going to bring this one to America, but when the airship captain found out what it was about, he got drunk, and instead brought it to Ecuador. FF5 brought the job system back, which was great, but the main character's name is Butts, and the plot only goes downhill from there. The final boss is called X-Death, which means exactly what it sounds like. He used to be dead. You go through the last dungeon, psyching yourself up to fight this badass Lich King, and it turns out his true form is a plant. And it's not even a cool plant, like a cactus, or a Venus flytrap, or Vash the Stampede. It is, in fact, a tree. But wait, the last boss in an FF game always has more than one form, and sure enough, beat up the tree and it turns into a bigger tree. That makes Final Fantasy V the biggest letdown in video gaming since World 7, 4, and Super Mario Bros. Finally, we have Final Fantasy VI, the game rated the best Final Fantasy ever by the American Association of Gamers who only play the first 5 minutes. The opening implies that your characters will get to wield guns and ride giant robots. Once the player is firmly attached to the controller by a petrified stream of his own drool, the plot veers sharply back into the same old Squaresoft shtick. You control a ragtag team of heroes who band together to save the world from the evil empire of Vector. But once you defeat Vector, it turns out there's a greater enemy. No, clowns. So anyway, you have to keep the clowns from destroying the world. You fail. But it's okay, because Ragnarok is no more than a mild inconvenience. Everyone you love and care about comes through perfectly fine. In the best Final Fantasy tradition, even people you hate and want to get rid of come through perfectly fine. This tradition was broken in later games, but not nearly often enough. In fact, once the world is destroyed, you get even more useless characters, including an insane clown of your very own. At this point, it doesn't even matter how the story goes, because they had to write the dialogue for 1001 Possible Parties, which is a writer's version of shooting yourself in the foot with a nuclear missile. Give me ninjas on the moon any day.